Live from Denver's Cherry Creek neighborhood, you are watching the Kyle Malnati Show. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and we are broadcasting from the office of Sherry Mulligan at Stewart Title. You are watching the show with my guests, Brandon, Blue, and Lindsey McClintock. Guys, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. So Brandon and Lindsey are clients of mine. They operate an apartment building ownership as well as development company called Blue Family Development. Lindsey, your maiden name is Blue. And you guys own 12 buildings with 2 slated to be developed. The existing buildings that they own are 105 units, and then the 2 buildings that you have, one is a 25 unit and then the other is a 6 unit. Did I get that right?
Yep.
I think I did. Okay, good. So what's your family history? How did you guys get into the business, and kind of share your story about how you guys got in the business?
Yeah, it started a long time ago with my grandfather. He and his brother had Blue and Blue Real Estate in Denver, and they had a building in Cherry Creek and then a building on 10th and Emerson that we still own. And then they passed those down to, my grandfather passed the 10th and Emerson building down to his kids. And then that's sort of how my dad got into it with his brother and sister. And then Brandon and my dad sort of did an offshoot.
Yeah, my dad and his brother always had kind of a side business.
Sure.
And then
your dad had a job at a company.
Correct. He worked finance for cargo, air cargo, and like Frontier Airlines back in the day.
Yeah.
And I had worked with Merrill Lynch back in the day doing finance, and then after 9/11 I was laid off, so I went back to school and got my MBA in real estate construction management, and worked for Kitty Home for a while. And then after the housing industry went down, my dad and I started doing this as our own business, full-time business, and bought our first building in 2008, 2007. 800 Emerson Street, and we've kind of just grown from there, up into now 12 buildings, 105 units. So we've been in the business here in Denver for a long time.
And at what point did you join on the scene, Lindsey?
A couple of years after they started, I had been working at furniture stores doing design and merchandising.
Cool.
So we found a lot in Platt Park that we thought we could redevelop fairly easily. So I joined on sort of to spearhead the development project, and then 6 years later that finally was built.
Yeah.
So it wasn't exactly as easy as we thought, but it was great. It was a good time to join, and then now there's definitely a lot to do.
Well, and I imagine your experience in design really helps out with the business part of owning and renovating apartments, because it's all about places people live.
Yeah, I feel like Brandon and my dad have more of the finance side, and I have sort of the design side. So it actually makes for a good team.
Good. And when you guys have talked about your dad, John, how has your dad intentionally brought you into the business, and as you were growing up, how has he taught you about what the family business was all about?
Sure. Well, as we said, my dad's owned apartment buildings here for a while, and back in the day, some of the locations weren't the greatest locations. So, everyone says in real estate, location, 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 but we've always focused on the market not being as good as it is today. Right. And even in a down market, we still have good locations where people are gonna wanna live. We've always bought in central Denver, always bought in a place where we thought, my little sister, Lindsey, would have lived and been safe. And also back in the day, he had other people manage his company, manage his apartments, and it was hard to trust them. So one of the big things he focuses on is us managing our own apartments.
Yeah.
Self-involvement, and just like we can always trust that something's going to happen. 100% buy-in. It's always been that way with us. Is never have someone from the outside come in and help us out. So that's been huge.
And we've had other shows where people have been real, very much promoting their management company. I think it fits differently depending on what the ownership group is like.
Yeah, I mean, we're at a point where we're growing,
but
we're still small enough where we can do everything in house, and that is important to our business model. But I definitely see where you get to a point where it's necessary.
Well, and what I found is it becomes very difficult at some point to manage a building like an owner would for a management company. They're at a little bit of a disadvantage because by nature they have to scale their business, and so they need to manage lots of other properties. And you mentioned, in our prep that you actually have gotten different people have come to you and said, "Would you manage our building?" And you guys have said no.
Correct. Yeah, we've been offered management of other people's properties, and I just can't do 100% buy-in into that.
Yeah.
The example I gave you was, at 3 a.m. if there's a flood, I'm not going to be that willing to go to someone else's apartment to
Right.
help. But if it's something we own and I know it will help us as a family and a family business, 100% I will be there.
Cool. So the next question I have is probably obvious. Lindsey, what's it like working with your brother?
I love it.
Good.
Actually. I feel really lucky to not only work for a company that I love and have a lot invested in, but I get to see my dad and my brother every day. And we have roles different enough that we're not all there at the same time.
Sure.
So we can make it sort of as little or as much as we want, but for the most part, we're a really good team and we work really well together. So.
Well, and you've had 30 years to get used to working with each other, not literally, but as you grow up as kids, if you're anything like my family, you're hanging out with each other all the time. And so that just becomes natural, and you kind of innately know what the other person is thinking or how they would react, or if that's an area that, Brandon should handle, or if it's an area that you should handle. And you guys mentioned you've got kind of separate roles naturally within the company. So what do you do on a daily basis? And then Brandon, I'll talk to you next about what you do.
I help. We all do everything.
Okay.
There's 3 of us, and then recently Brandon's wife joined, so
Oh,
4 of us now. But so everything, like I've been the website designer to my real role is sort of helping with renovations and choosing all the finishes and stuff like that, and then also sort of taking on a role in our new development projects, working with the city and stuff like that.
And then Brandon, what is your role within the company?
I do most of the management, or only the management for our company, and then any type of fixes that we need in like a leaky faucet, I do a lot of that, managing our handyman that work with us. So Lindsey kind of gives me the palette to work with, and I help bring that together timing wise and stuff like that. But we definitely have separate roles, and working with Lindsey's great. We all have the same goals, as a company. We want to be aggressive, but also kind of tone things back when my dad gets out of hand, because as I told you before, he really wants to buy almost every building we can afford in Denver, and some of those aren't the greatest fit for our company.
Sure.
And so we kind of pull on each other and make sure that we're all invested in this 100%, and so far it has worked great.
And that's great when it seems like all of you have the ability to share your thoughts, and each of you actually listens to that. And just because dad wants to go do something, if it's not a good fit for what you guys are doing, you don't do it. It's not like dad puts his fist down and says, "We're doing it." So that's a good thing that you have the ability to challenge each other.
Yeah, one of our best buildings, well, we have a lot of great buildings, but it was 910 South Pearl, and it was just a
Dump.
And my dad said, heck no.
Yeah.
And we
Talked
pushed, and now it's a great building.
So our question from our last guest, Josh Steck, last month asked, what is your plan as far as creating a legacy within your own family? And you have some of that already, but carrying that legacy forward, and then also, probably importantly for more of a metro-wide type of legacy, what type of legacy do you plan to leave on Denver as property owners?
I think we would just like to continue growing in Denver, and creating great buildings that people really are desirable for people to live in. There's so many apartments right now, but I think ours are in great locations. They're really well done. And so hopefully people will continue to want, and tenants really like the family aspect, and how personal it is. So hopefully we'll still keep growing, and that'll be our footprint in Denver. And then as far as a legacy, I would love to get to a point where our kids are the ones that, run Blue Family Development in the future.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, and I distinctly remember going to the apartments my dad owned growing up, and it's just like I just mentioned, 910 South Pearl, and when it was totally gutted, I went over there with my kids.
Oh, cool.
So it's just I hope I raise them having the same interest in real estate.
I think what I've found is for whether you're a small business owner, you own a bakery, or you're a real estate owner, which are small business owners also, those folks really intentionally involve their kids in their business. And it doesn't have to be some big orchestrated thing. Come on over, we're planting flowers today at the building and it's a Saturday and you're gonna help me. Or we talked about Judd Brown, dismantling a boiler over a summer when he was in high school and realizing that these buildings, yes, they're investments and they're assets, but there's also hard work behind it. And I think that helps to create a situation where your kids are gracious and they can walk into the business once we're gone, once the patriarch and matriarchs of the business are gone, and not be entitled, not be snotty about it, and really understand that there's work behind this.
For sure.
So I love that family legacy aspect of things. Brandon, what advice, especially since you're on the ground, boots on the ground, interacting with tenants, what advice would you give to a brand new investor that's aspiring to own an apartment building?
Well, I think one of the most important, or there's a couple things that are definitely very important. Sorry, I would say building relationships with people. You're gonna need bankers to loan you money for these. That's a huge part of this business. And knowing that if you buy a building, you're not just gonna be able to raise rents just by buying the building. You're gonna have to put some love and work into these buildings to make them actually function well. And we have this great crew that does all of our work, and our company would not exist without them. We can buy buildings that no one can and fix them up and make them a great home for someone. So having a good crew behind you and building relationships, our HVAC guy has, dug us out so many holes, that we would not be able to do if I had to call someone 1-800-plumbers. That would just not work. You need to have somebody and know people in every part of the business to help you along, because you're not going to know everything.
Yeah, and so to get to those answers, there's lots of people who are willing to help.
Questions.
You can ask questions of your realtor. You can ask questions of the seller, who's worked great for you, who hasn't worked great for you, because everybody wants to tell you who didn't work out well.
Right.
And what you do is you create this real estate Rolodex, for lack of a better term.
Sure.
And I've actually seen a Rolodex on your dad's desk. It's old-fashioned, but collecting cards and keeping those folks, because what happens is when you have an emergency at 11 o'clock at night, you want the guy that you know, like, and trust to come over there,
Correct.
not some random person that's going to gouge you. You want to create those relationships. So I had mentioned earlier, Josh Steck asked you a question. What would you like to ask as far as a question about real estate to our next month's guest?
Well, the new law in Denver was about the condo conversions, and I think lowering the limits. Yes.
Law,
we have a lot of apartments that could easily be converted to condos. So I was wanting to ask the next guest, when do you think that condo conversion?
When that'll come back.
Yeah, when is that going to come back?
Yeah, because it halted in 2009 when the downturn occurred. We saw a lot of apartments being converted in 99, 2000, and all the way up through 2007, 2008. So that'll be a great question to see what they think.
Mm-hmm.
So I always get a gift for my guests. And I don't know if you guys knew this, and I know you guys are not huge into reading business books, but this is a special book to me. It's the Entree Leadership book by Dave Ramsey. And the reason I'm giving it to you, you're welcome, is it is Dave's tactical playbook for how he created his business. So Dave's got a real famous story. He went bankrupt. He was a real estate investor, had too many loans, was way over leveraged, and the banks called all of his notes. And it started a spin downward for 2 years where he lost everything. So he vowed, he's like, I'm never gonna borrow again. That's his platform. And so he wrote the book Financial Peace, which sold over 1 million copies. He wrote the book The Total Money Makeover, which has sold, I think, 5 or 6 million copies. Whoa. And this book, Entree Leadership, was a New York Times bestseller. And the special part about it is I just 2 weeks ago, got back from a week-long training, personally done by Dave, for 150 other business owners throughout the nation that they come and they learn in detail, like an MBA style class that we graduated from, where he teaches us from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock every single day. It was really pretty cool. So all the lessons are in this book, and it's an easier read. Carly's reading it, I'm reading it. We require the folks in our company to read the book, and so I hope you'll enjoy it. It's not a heavy read, and if you don't read it, just give it to someone that you
No,
know
thank
like.
you.
Yeah, much
Right.
appreciated.
My
Well,
favorite nonfiction.
As we always say, as we always like to say on the Kyle Malnati Show, this is the show where multifamily matters. We're so appreciative of Brandon Blue and Lindsey McClintock for being our guests today. We're appreciative of Stuart Title, and as I love to say, I will see you around the neighborhood.